Asia has 60% of the world's population. The incomes are rising very fast, but we're talking about, on 3.5 billion people moving on a fairly rapid course to high income status. The effect of this is probably going to be, and some additional growth in other parts of the world, because the growth patterns in the developing world are pretty positive, despite the shocks. We're talking about, over a relatively short period, 20 or 25 years, possibly tripling the size of the global economy. People who have thought about this worry about whether our models, the way we interact with the natural capital, the environment, the resources that we have, is sustainable at a global GDP of, let's call it 65 to 70 trillion. If you're worried about that, then you've got to be worried about, a global GDP that's running in the $200 trillion range. I mean, it's just hard to believe. And I don't think slowing it down is an option. I mean, you can't go to the developing world and say just because you came second and third, you don't get to participate. So the logical consequence of thinking that way is you have to reinvent the growth model. And it has to be reinvented in such a way as to be much more economical in the stresses and strains and demands it puts on the planet. And I think that's essentially the process that we're in. The top-down, sort of policy, international agreements part isn't working very well yet. That doesn't mean it won't, but the decentralized bottom-up is turning out to be pretty interesting and effective. So you have corporations doing quite interesting things with new production models that are very energy efficient, very low on carbon output. You've got all kinds of shifts in individual behavior. These things interact. Companies take these things seriously in part because their values are pushing them that way, but partly because their customers' employees are pushing them that way. I would encourage them to adopt sensible building codes that result in environmentally sound buildings. There is lots of analysis that suggests that the single biggest lever that you've got in achieving energy efficiency is paying attention to the way buildings are built and the building codes. And market forces don't seem to get the job done. Maybe because people don't perceive or understand the benefits, so they don't buy, what they need to sort of buy in the structure. But it's a huge opportunity. And then just keep it on the agenda and keep working at it. In the China case, they took down the growth targets to 7 or 7.5% in order to give themselves the flexibility to deal with equity and social issues on the one hand and the sustainability issues on the other. That just seems smart. 7% is fine if the growth is more inclusive and if the quality of life is, improving along with the growth rates. When the tsunami hit Japan, all these global supply chains froze up and we were closing auto plants in odd places because a very small chunk of the supply chain and parts were not coming through. I don't know whether we'll sort of get over this pattern of underinvestment and look forward. It's hard. You can play that one either way. I mean, you can say people never really get it and they won't let their elected officials and policymakers spend the money and tax them to do it, or they will. I mean, I don't know how to guess. But my guess is we're pretty underinvested in most places in the world in protective measures and what the climate change people call adaptation.